Good afternoon. I see that more and more people are joining. Maybe I say we could start. What do you say, Ify?
Hello, everyone. Yes, I think we can slowly get starting, and like that, we make sure that we have a smooth session. So from our side, thanks all for joining. I'm Efigenia Stoilova, working on the Interoperable Europe Academy, together with Mariana and Bernard. And just to start with, we would like to let you know that this meeting is being recorded, also to be able to share it with those participants that might not be able to make it today. So you will also receive it once the meeting is over. But in the meantime, we also first wanted to make sure that those of you who are not familiar with the Interoperable Europe Academy know what it is. So I will just now briefly introduce it so that you all know a bit more on what the Interoperable Europe Academy is. So the Academy was founded in 2019 with the objective of developing civil service competencies by providing e-learning courses and also live trainings on interoperability and digital skills. Throughout the time, the Academy has more than 30 e-learning courses. We're also hosting webinars. So we have an upcoming seasonal school. We are currently also developing the peer learning policy briefs. In those, we showcase different solutions from different member states at different levels, at the national, regional, and local, that could serve as inspiration for others to use those solutions and implement them at their level. So these are the things that we currently do, but of course we are constantly working on developing new materials, such as newer learning courses, creating learning paths, but also to make sure that our material is accessible in all the EU different languages. We are planning to translate our courses, but we're also working on developing a future interoperability certification, so stay on the loop for that. Just to give you the context also of where we stand today, we are organizing learning sessions on different topics. We had one in the beginning of April on interoperability assessments. Today we have one on regulatory sandboxes, and we have an upcoming learning session on GovTech, to which we're also inviting you in case you would like to join. In the future, we're also going to be hosting lectures at universities on different topics. So for the time being, we have one scheduled to tackle the topic of interoperability for May, but we still have two more lectures to be defined, as we want to make sure that we are targeting the needs of universities. We are also very excited to invite you all to our annual seasonal school that will be taking place from the 13th to the 15th of May in the mornings, in which you will be able to hear not only what interoperability stands for, but also we can update you on regulatory sandboxes, interoperability assessments, and also GovTech. But it will be a great opportunity for you to get to know each other and exchange best practices, ideas, and get to know each other, so that we can foster this feeling of community, of the Interoperable Europe community. And last but not least, as I already mentioned, we have the peer learning policy briefs. We have already published the very first one on the digital counter, but we are currently working on 2 or 3 additional ones on and even more than the 2 and 3, because this is work ongoing. So we are planning to have one on how to set up a smart city, but also how to implement a local digital twin. And in the future, we plan to have one on interoperability assessments. But also, if you feel that you have an interesting solution that you would like to share to inspire others, of course, we are inviting you to do that with us. And I think that's it from our side. I will now give the floor back to Eleonora, who has prepared a very interesting presentation together with the speakers.
Thanks, Ify. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you all join soon after Easter break. So thanks for being here. I will quickly share my screen. Let me know if you can see it. All right.
It's
So,
loading. We can see it now.
okay, great. So thanks a lot for joining today. And as briefly mentioned by Ify, the focus for our learning session today is the Interoperability Regulatory Sandboxes. I'm pleased and delighted to be joined later today by our colleagues from DG Regio, Delia Bonsignore and Riccardo Ferreira, who will share with us some of their work related to the topic of today. So very briefly, our agenda will be first to begin from the innovation support measures and the legal basis for the regulatory sandboxes through the Interoperable Europe Act. I will briefly mention what are the scope of these innovation support measures, to then dive a bit more deeper into the interoperability regulatory sandboxes, and finally would like to focus a bit more on what are the cross-border regulatory issues that can emerge and how the sandboxes could be useful to address them. And we will end with a Q&A to also hear your thoughts today. So starting from the legal basis of these sandboxes, the Interoperable Europe Act that was entered into force on the 11th of April 2024 sets the foundation for promoting a cross-border interoperability of trans-European digital public services. So the objective of the regulation is to contribute to this interoperability of the underlying network and information system across union entities and public sector bodies. The Act builds on different blocks from incentivizing recognized and reusable interoperability solutions to a proper governance system with the Interoperable Europe Board, a community being formed together with mandatory interoperability assessments. But for the focus of today, I really just want to focus on the tools that it makes available for supporting interoperability and the creation of interoperability solutions in Europe. Among these tools, which are mandated in Article 10 of the Innovation Support Measures, there is this objective of fostering a GovTech ecosystem. So when we speak of GovTech, we speak of the cooperation between public and private sector to create digital transformation in governments across Europe. And in order to support this GovTech community, but also the experimentation with interoperability solutions, the regulatory sandboxes have been introduced as an innovation support measures. So we have in particular two articles, Article 11 and 12, that describe a bit more what are the sandboxes and why they are useful for the purposes of the interoperability of the Interoperable Europe Act. To give, however, a bit more of a context to what are these sandboxes, why are they useful, I would really want to focus on this keyword that is experimentation. So you can find below in the slide this QR code to research by the Joint Research Center published in 2022. That compares the different experimentation tools that are increasingly being used by policymakers. In fact, why does this word matter today? Why are we talking about experimentation and how is this linked to interoperability? So with the rapid pace of innovation and emerging technologies, policymakers are increasingly turning to innovation tools to navigate regulatory challenges and foster innovations. But some governments are responding to the increasing pace of innovation in different ways. Some go from wait and see approaches, and others go to instead outright bans of certain technology applications, as we have seen in the case of the AI Act. Some other approaches instead are those of experimenting with regulatory learning, so with the process of understanding how innovation fits within legal frameworks and understanding together with the adequate stakeholders if these frameworks are outdated, unclear, or missing. So in order to make regulation more relevant, adaptive, and also supportive on innovation and not stagnant, different experimentation tools have emerged. These are, and I summarize in this slide 3 of them, regulatory sandboxes, test beds, and living labs. The key differences between these are in their scope, purpose, and regulatory involvement, but essentially they seek to fulfill the same purpose of promoting innovation and promoting a more flexible and understanding regulatory framework. So if we go and look at the test beds, these are more technical experiments that really only focus on the development, testing of a product or service, and they typically do not involve regulatory authorities. Living labs, on the other hand, also focus on experimentation, but they include the involvement of citizens, and they're really aimed at a process of co-creation with the relevant stakeholders, and they're not usually associated to regulatory authorities. The regulatory sandboxes, however, and you see there is a hint in the name already, enable a testing of innovations in a controlled real-world environment. And here, typically, there is a much more present involvement of the authorities. So the objective of a regulatory sandbox within this experimentation tools framework is to improve legal certainty. The point of a regulatory sandbox here is to promote this regulatory dialogue with the right stakeholders to learn whether this new innovation perhaps introduces new risks. Does it need further refinement of the regulatory framework at hand? And it often includes a degree of flexibility and derogation from the legal framework. However, in the case of the interoperability sandbox, for example, there is no derogation from the existing frameworks. So this call for sandboxes was also echoed by the Council conclusions in 2020 that really started recognizing a bit more how the sandboxes have a role in promoting innovation, experimentation, more flexible legislative frameworks. And also the new European Innovation Agenda calls for this deepening of the European investments for innovation and efforts to make the regulatory experimentation fruitful for these purposes of innovation. So if we take a step back and we go into what the EU Interoperable Europe Act mandates through its articles 10, 11, and 12, we can see that the sandboxes, and here I really want to emphasize how we talk about interoperability regulatory sandboxes, because it's a matter of branding. So we know that these sandboxes have different purposes, they can vary according to the context, but here we are really speaking about interoperability as the main focus. So when you try to think about a sandbox and it's not clear whether it's, what is the difference between an AI sandbox, an interoperability sandbox, or for example, virtual world sandbox, you really need to go and look at the eligibility requirements and what are the objectives of the sandbox at hand. So in our case, for the Interoperable Europe Act, we know that it is a controlled test environment. It is set up by a minimum of 3 union entities or public sector bodies. And this is a fundamental aspect because the sandbox is mainly aimed at public sector authorities. Instead, we know that, for example, the AI sandbox has a strong focus on the private sector, on the developers, the deployers. And here we really want to focus on what are the regulatory issues that public sector bodies want to tackle. And the idea is to develop, train, test, and validate these interoperability solutions to support cross-border interoperability. It's important to notice, however, that they are not a funding instrument. It is not a way to bypass EU regulatory frameworks. So if you join a sandbox and you join this conversation with the different regulatory authorities, you are not being excluded from the regulatory frameworks. They are still applying. So there is no lex specialis for the sandboxes. Just to summarize a bit what the regulation says, the aim is to foster innovation, facilitate cross-border cooperation between national, regional, and local competent authorities. But also, one of the key objectives is to facilitate the development of an open European ecosystem of GovTech. So while the sandbox is mainly aimed at public sector authorities, and you can find this specified in Article 11, upon request of these entities that decide to set up a sandbox, they can also include GovTech actors. So here the focus shifts and it becomes a key dynamic of innovation support and cooperation between the expertise that comes from the actors of the GovTech ecosystems, the regulators, and then the other authorities involved in the supervision. I would just like to stop here in case there are any questions or something is unclear. I don't know if you can see the chat.
I don't see any questions. Sorry, I don't have my camera, but of course, feel free to jump and write them in the chat or just raise your hand and we will address it in the meantime. Thanks.
Perfect. Then, yeah, please feel free if any concept is not clear to just drop a message in the chat. But going back to the interoperability sandboxes, what I really wanted to emphasize is that this is an innovation tool, but it is a voluntary one. So one of the key differences, for example, from the AI Act regulatory sandboxes is that the AI Act mandates these sandboxes as a legal obligation for member states. Ours is a voluntary tool. It is one that can be set up by member states in collaboration with other member states authorities, which can be at regional, local, or national level, but it is also open to union entities. So this is a really important tool that can support the member states that wish to cooperate and address cross-border issues, which normally cannot be addressed within their own member state level. So one of the objectives is that member states at the national level alone cannot usually support some limitations of the EU-wide legal framework. And here is a really dedicated space to address some of these challenges. It's true that it is a quite dense concept and it is also a new concept. So if you go and look into the literature, you look at some of the research from the OECD, the World Bank, the regulatory sandboxes are something that was mainly born from the financial sector. So it is quite a recent application to extend the idea of a sandbox to other fields, such as the digital field, digital regulation, but also health and environmental applications. In our context, I tried to summarize here through this sort of timeline how exactly the sandbox process works. So on one hand, you have the responsible participants that are public sector bodies or EU entities that have to come together and decide to establish a regulatory sandbox. Here, the element of having at least 3 public sector bodies is fundamental because it sets up the interoperable and cooperative dimension by default already at the beginning. So you know that there will have to be 3 authorities that cooperate together on a common issue, on a common challenge that they wish to address through a sandbox. Then the next phase is that for the Commission, there will be an authorization phase involved if other EU entities are inside the establishing participants. So when it is only member state and local, regional or national level administrations that decide to set up a sandbox, the authorization is not required from the Commission, of course. However, throughout the process, what is crucial is the continuous involvement of the EDPS, the Interoperable Europe Board, that have a crucial role for overseeing and being involved in this process of regulatory learning. The next phase is that once you come together with the adequate participants, you have to submit a plan. This specific plan is set out in the main act with the minimum provisions being included in Article 12, but also you will find more information coming from the implementing act that will be published very soon. The timing of this sandbox is usually 2 years. So the Act gives this deadline, but it is also potentially extendable by 1 year. And two final fundamental parts of this sandbox process is the reporting. So we know that the idea of a sandbox is to gather this regulatory learning, so to exchange in conversation in a controlled space with the authorities that are supervising, but then also potential GovTech participants, to extract all the key information that can help adapt a new innovation, potentially to a regulation, or also anticipate any risks that can come with a new innovative process. So what is fundamental here is the reporting that takes place. So the extracting of information from the sandbox, and this will be both a periodic and final reporting that will then be issued by the Interoperable Europe Board. So just to clarify on the Commission side, what are some key obligations is this implementing act that will be adopted very soon, so Q2 2025, and then also relevant information will be published on the Interoperable Europe portal, where you will find very soon more information on how to join a sandbox, what does a sandbox entail, and you will also find these slides that I'm sharing with you today. So with this general overview that I gave of regulatory sandboxes, and I understand it can be quite dense, so please feel free to ask any question also in our Q&A session later, but on the chat. And I would like to now open the floor to our guest speakers from DG Regio that could give us a very interesting and complementary angle. So I have given an overview of what the Act says, of the legal basis, of what these regulatory sandboxes are. But now we really want to delve a bit deeper into what are these cross-border challenges that administrations can face. And I will be very happy to have Delia join and explain a bit more the experiences that they have on these use cases of cross-border challenges.
Many thanks there, Eleonora. I hope you can see my screen. If you could confirm, that would be helpful.
Yes.
Many thanks. So first of all, thank you for inviting me and Riccardo to be here today to this very interesting meeting. I'm Delia, and my colleague is also here connected, Riccardo Ferreira. We work in DG Regional and Urban Policy in the unit dealing with cross-border cooperation and Interreg, which is the funding instrument. So I will be introducing to you today what is B-Solutions. I hope you can see the slide transitioning. Voila.
Not yet, but yes, now yes.
All right, many thanks. So B-Solutions is an initiative that we develop in order to support cross-border cooperation beyond Interreg funding. With this initiative, what we do is to assess legal and administrative obstacles that can hamper or impede cross-border interactions in various sectors. And here I would like to make a small clarification. When we speak about cross-border cooperation, we speak about proximity, cross-border, so we are referring really to regions that lay on a border and cooperate with the neighboring region on the other side of that border. So it's really proximity cooperation. It's not necessarily interregional or transnational cooperation, as we may observe in other cooperation schemes. Also, B-Solutions is cross-thematic. We really work on all topics that are related to cohesion policy and generally to cooperation. And the digital sector or digital public services is one of them. This is a bottom-up initiative, which means that a case of obstacle is submitted by a local administration, and then this case is assessed by a legal expert. So the initiative provides legal expertise that analyzes really the case and what's the obstacle that it's hampering or impeding cooperation in that specific geographical area, and it proposes solutions on how to solve them. We will see here a bit more in detail how this works. As you can see in this slide, B-Solutions is divided into objectives. This is objective 1. So you see that there is the European Commission as active player that then implements the action through the European Association of Border Regions, which usually goes through the cases and assigns an expert to the case, which, of course, as I mentioned before, analyzes what are the root cases of these obstacles. So what is it that is really impeding cooperation activities in the area and in this specific topic, and provides solutions for this specific case. Those solutions then need to be taken up by the competent authorities at local level. So this is how usually it works. And also what happens is that at EU level, so not only solutions are provided at local level, but at EU level, we also keep on building knowledge on what are the obstacles to cooperation, and also hands-on how much efforts we need to make in each sector to allow for better integration and cohesion among our regions. This is objective 2 of B-Solutions. So the first phase is really that of analyzing the case and understanding what's the obstacle. Objective 2 instead allows us really to bring together all the competent authorities at local level. And what we do is really to develop a workshop with them on and try to, let's say, foster the ground for better cooperation, and for these obstacles then to be addressed at local level by the relevant competent authority. This is a bit, in this slide, you can see a bit an overview of how we have collected all these cases. They are collected in compendium. There is different editions of it. Year by year, they're being published. And in each compendium, what you will find is an overview of each obstacle identified through this initiative. So you will see the context of the obstacle, you will see what are the obstacles generally, legal or administrative, most likely, and also what are the possible solutions proposed by our experts. And I would really recommend, if you visit the compendium, I would really invite you to scan this QR code, because thanks to this, you will go to the complete report developed by the legal expert. And so you will gain a deeper overview or deeper idea of what's really the obstacles and the solutions proposed. As of now, we have already analyzed 19 cases. Actually, the number is a bit higher, but right now I will walk you through a bit what are the main findings of the analysis of these first 90 cases. This is a bit the overview of the methodology that we used to go through this general analysis. I mean, as I've already explained, you see that we have one expert report for each case, which usually brings to at least one legal and administrative obstacle. Then we have assessed the 90 reports produced, and we clustered all the obstacles identified per proponent. So who is it that submitted the case? Per the nature of obstacle. Is the obstacle of legal nature? Is the obstacle of administrative nature? Is the obstacle technical, etc.? And then we have also clustered for root causes and potential solutions. I will give you a brief overview also of what are the main findings of this analysis carried out. In the first place, what was highlighted from this analysis is that the majority of the proponents are regional administrations and EGTCs. EGTCs are cross-border legal bodies, and it's called European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation. So it's really the representatives of those territories who usually submit cases of obstacles. Then we see also that the main obstacles identified over the 90 cases analyzed in this framework are really legal obstacles. So this is a big point for reflection on what are the efforts that we need to make in order to allow for more cooperation in Europe. And what we can see is that sometimes legal frameworks on either side of the border are contradicting each other, and hence this really hampers cooperation efforts on the ground. This can be, for instance, differing technical standards for public transport, such as differing lights in tramways, for instance, that hamper the fact that a tram can, let's say, cross the border. So we see a variety of obstacles out there, which main root cause is really legislation. Then we also have cases in which the national law does not consider indeed that a border exists, and so spatial planning is done geographically limited, let's say, to the national territory, notwithstanding the fact that naturally the territory will also imply cooperation with the other side of the border for more opportunities, etc. And then we see also that some of the obstacles are caused by lack of mandate to intervene beyond the border. So this is really governance then. When it comes to the analysis of the root causes that we have identified, what we see is that majority of those come from national law or national transposition of EU legislation is also one of the causes, and also lack of administrative procedures out there. The majority of proposed solutions that we have observed in these 90 cases really concern the establishment of bilateral agreements. So the majority of the cases, in the majority of the cases, the experts that worked on the concrete obstacles suggested the creation of bilateral agreements because this is simply easier to and more operational, because if you have to go through the let's say lengthy and complex process of legislative revision, this may be more time consuming, while bilateral agreements really help tackle specific points. And then a new proposal for regulation is out there. It's called Bridge EU, and this would really help and foster cooperation efforts by allowing on a voluntary basis to solve specific obstacles. Lastly, I wanted to draw your attention to really some specific cases related to interoperability. In the first place, in the healthcare sector, we've seen a case submitted in the border in between Spain and Portugal, for which the main obstacle was the impossibility for patients to be cured on the other side of the border, because it was very difficult to access their data. And the solution provided was the establishment of a cross-border protocol in order to allow for data exchange. So what we see is that access of patients' data on the other side of the border is always impeded, and this, of course, prevents patients to receive treatment very often. Another case is the cross-border healthcare access from Valga Valga. This is 2 towns in the Estonian-Latvian border. In this geographical area, patients would let's say be able to access the facilities of the hospital on the other side of the border, but the right to access the hospital is really hampered by different cost reimbursement norms. So what would let's say facilitate and allow for patients to be cured on the other side of the border is that of establishing, also in this case, a bilateral agreement between Latvia and Estonia in order to facilitate that. And generally, I wanted to, let's say, bring to your attention general obstacles that we identify whenever it comes to healthcare. So in the first place, as already mentioned, the access to patient data, incompatible cost reimbursement schemes among different member states, and also lack of immediate recognition of staff. So difficulties also in this case. Other another area that, let's say, we wanted to bring to your attention is the one of transport. In one case, in between Germany and Austria, the obstacle to cross-border public transport was created by inadequate or non-existent information, data, and digital services across the borders. So the solution proposed was really the introduction of joint digital services, including the development of common cross-border information portals, mobility app, timetable information systems. It would boost really cooperation in this area and allow for the provision of cross-border public transport. The typical challenges that we see in transport and generally in public services is the lack of legal competence to promote transport across the border, but also diverging technical regulations that hamper interoperability, indeed, diverging provisions on operations that hamper employment of staff across the border, and also the difficulties in recognizing qualifications of some professions. Lastly, we have the field of employment. In one case, in between Italy and Austria, what we observed is that the current commuter tracking systems are uncoordinated and inefficient, and this leads also to challenges for taxation, for the healthcare systems and social security. And so also this also, of course, influences the availability and willingness of people to work across the border. The solution proposed in this case also was new joint administrative procedures to design local action plans, but also protocols or memorandum of understanding. So also in this case is mostly on a bilateral level. And typical challenges that we do see are uncertain or diverging regulations on social security, taxes, working conditions, for instance, the possibility to telework, that in some cases represents more obstacles than potential in some border areas. The recognition of diplomas, which sometimes is not possible or is not automatic. So it depends then case by case, and the access to training is not always harmonized, and there is also we can find, for instance, differences in internship frameworks. Lastly, this is a bit an overview of the work we develop, because I would really invite you to then access the compendium with all the cases that we have worked on so far to find a bit more about the details. You can also see some other publications that we delivered, so what it means living in a cross-border region. There you will find stories of people really experimenting day-to-day obstacles to cooperation. And then I would invite you also to look at our brochures that tackle also thematic obstacles in different sectors. This is not really the end of our efforts on border obstacles. B-Solutions is a piloting initiative, but it does show very clearly that we still have a lot of work to do in the EU to make sure we can solve border obstacles and hence facilitate cooperation and really contribute to EU integration. And these issues can be solved, and can be solved also through Interreg as funding scheme dedicated to cooperation itself, but also via other funding streams that can be mainstream cohesion policy programs that have a dedicated, let's say, section on cooperation. With this, I thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Many thanks.
Thank you, Delia. I think this was really illuminating in the amount of detail that you showed of how these interoperability issues exist at cross-border regional level, and I think our work is more interlinked than we thought. And with the whole presentation that we did in the beginning on the sandboxes, it could really show how we have many concrete use cases that could be addressed. through these sandboxes. And in that space, they could provide a sort of neutral testing ground to overcome some of these mismatches, and also a way to document evidence of this regulatory learning. So from administrations that already experience these issues, and they can also feed it back into the compendium. So from these reports from the sandboxes, it can then go directly to your pilots. But yeah, let's see if there are any questions in the chat. And I would also invite you, for any participants they're still here for the last 5 minutes, to join us in a Slido. So I will send a link in the chat. And it would be great to hear from you, your experiences, and how do you think that these two different concepts that we just presented, so the experience from the cross-border regions, the tangible experiences of legal obstacles that many administrations face, and then on the other hand, this new tool of the sandbox, is it something interesting for you? How can it be of use to some tangible issues that you are facing? So I would please invite you to join the Slido. Maybe we can leave 1 minute, 1 or 2 minutes to fill in. If you have any concrete use cases that you think could be interesting to experiment with in a sandbox, any idea that comes to mind, you could put it in the Slido link, and we will share the results together afterwards. Maybe in the meantime, while we wait, I have a question for you, Delia. So based on the first part of our presentation, where do you think that some urgent interoperability use cases could be addressed through a sandbox based on your experience?
Many thanks for your question. We see in the overview and panorama of obstacles identified through B-Solution is extremely variegated, and it really touches upon a variety of policy areas that could be addressed. I think that then the urgency of addressing some of them is really local, because you will see some border areas. I mean, obstacles variegate very much also based on geography, because the, let's say, comparison of legal frameworks or administrative procedures in between two member states and two others are completely different. So I would say that there is not necessarily one specific obstacle that should be tackled first, but for sure interconnection of digital public services definitely is. Cooperation activities on the ground, then on all sectors, as well as harmonization of many legislative acts and administrative procedures. I don't know, Riccardo, whether you want to complement or offer a different overview. I hear he says no. So.
Okay, you have been comprehensive enough. Okay. Yeah, but we have a few votings coming in, but I'll leave some more time, because I just wanted to ask you a follow-up question. That you mentioned that these bilateral agreements are often more easier ways to go about this. How do you think that, for example, regulatory sandbox could represent an alternative to this type of reasoning? So if we have a way to adapt EU law more easily because we have a new solution, such as a sandbox, how could this be of help? And what are the blockages in the revision of EU law based on the data you have?
Thank you also for this question. I have a very clear example on how regulatory sandboxes could very much contribute. We've been working recently on, as I said, we work on really different fields of policy to really facilitate then cooperation at local level. And one of those fields is that of energy communities. So what we wanted to try to foster was the possibility to establish energy communities across the border. You may imagine that this field of work entails a variety of sectors that go from energy market to technical levels such as grid, etc., and were emerged, for instance, that more than a bilateral agreement, a regulatory sandbox would be helpful to understand really how to allow for these initiatives to be established at cross-border levels. So this was a clear example of how a regulatory sandbox could work well. I don't know, Ricardo, whether you have any other example that you would like to flag. We cannot hear.
Okay. Well, maybe wary of time, seeing as the session. Well, I don't know if Ricardo was speaking already.
I see.
Okay.
You are muted.
Now we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I was struggling with the microphone. Thank you. One of the details that sandboxes could be helpful is not looking to cases that are enrooted on European law, but looking to cases that are enrooted on national law. One of the frequent examples that we have is, for example, the capability for one ambulance to circulate across the border, which is something that we assume everything works. But if you have an accident by the border and the closest hospital is just across the border, frequently the ambulance cannot take you to the closest hospital because of diverging national regulation. On this type of issues that are enrooted on national law, sandboxes with a few administrations only, those related to that border, could be a very interesting way to test new ways of regulation at national level.
Yeah. Thanks for your input. I think that's very interesting indeed, because I mentioned EU law, but the national law is absolutely an important part, and I think it echoes some of the responses that are coming in. I'm having some issues in showing the slide, so maybe I can just read it out loud. So we have an input from Michal from Poland about legal and administrative barriers that are about limiting cooperation between rescue services and other institutions. So that echoes what you just mentioned, but then also transport, communication, infrastructure gaps. So what happens between communes living close to each other, different sides of the member state borders. Some other input from the voting was about, again, legislative cases, cooperation between member states. So we have here some clear dimensions, which is on one hand, the legal barriers. So it's really about what are the cases of national EU law that need better answers. But then we also have more technical layers. So one vote was about improving data quality, so exchanging data better between member states. And then another input is about contact with stakeholders. I'm not sure who voted for this. If you have any more input on what do you mean by contact with stakeholders, please feel free to raise your hand or directly speak. Okay, I don't think we have an answer, but being wary of time, I think I would just leave the floor to Delia for your last input, and then maybe we can head towards the end of the session.
Many thanks. I just wanted to flag, based on also what I saw in the chat, that different people were indeed mentioning disaster risk management across borders. So this type of cooperation, and I wanted to mention that indeed we developed a study on cross-border disaster risk management. I put the link in the chat. There you can find an overview on where we are at. Both in all EU internal borders, but also with 6 candidate countries. This was mapped, and then there is a specific publication. The link is also in the chat, where you can find the main risks identified per border, but also what are the recommendations put forward to, let's say, foster cooperation activities in this field. And one of the recommendations that came out of the study, for instance, is really interoperability. That it's still one major challenge at EU level that should be addressed. So I just wanted to address this shortly. Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot for sharing. And I'd say that maybe we can head towards the end of the session. Maybe just before wrapping up, just wanted to give some key information, which is that if you have more questions on the regulatory sandboxes, you will find soon information on the Interoperable Europe portal. There will be a dedicated page with more information on what these interoperability sandboxes are. Then we also are still in the process of developing the Implementing Act that will issue more information on the sandboxes, on the reports that ought to be issued throughout, and then also some common templates to facilitate the reporting requirements. For any question, please do not hesitate to reach us on our functional mailbox, and I will leave the floor also to the Academy to wrap up. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Eleonora and team. I think it was a very, very interesting session. I personally learned a lot, but also for those who just like me, enjoy learning about new topics and more in-depth topics, I just shared the link to register for our Interoperable Europe Academy Seasonal School 2025 that, as I mentioned, will be taking place in just a couple of weeks. So feel free to register, and I'm pretty sure that we might have some developments on regulatory sandboxes that we will be sharing at the event. And this is it from my side, but maybe my colleagues, Bernard, I see is here, would like to say something as well.
I see you show
Yes,
up.
thank you very much for your participation. And no, I let the floor to Eleonora.
Okay, I see you appear with my name also, but yeah, thanks a lot then everyone for the attention, for your contribution, and looking forward to see you in the next learning sessions by the Academy.